The Xenoblade Chronicles series to me has always seemed like the most non-Nintendo Nintendo IP. It's a massive jrpg series with very intricate mechanics, interesting battle systems, massive landscapes to explore, and arguably some of the most well-developed writing to come out of a first-party Nintendo game. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 continues that trend by refining the already great battle gameplay foundation, further expanding the worlds you can explore, and developing a new cast of characters to follow through this narrative of all-out war. Despite the 3 in the name, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a primarily isolated story, meaning that you don't need to jump into the first 2 games before playing this one. That's not to say that those who did won't be rewarded, as there is an occasional hint or reference to something, just nothing that would completely derail the story if you didn't play those games before. Either way, rest assured if you're a returning player, you'll be rewarded, and if you've never played a game in the series, you won't have any issues starting off with this one. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 opens up in the world of Aionios, a planet home to 2 competing factions, Keves and Agnus, who over the years of endless war have torn apart the planet. The average lifespan of the soldiers on this planet is only 10 years, and with such a short amount of time, they devote their lives to the war between the 2 factions. It's here where we follow a trio from the Keves faction, who, in the middle of a fight with another trio from the opposing faction, get attacked by a mysterious new threat. It's this new encounter that helps the 6 soldiers come to realize not everything may be as it seems. As the 2 groups try to put aside their differences, they work together to stay alive and get to the bottom of the mysteries shrouding their factions. This ragtag team of soldiers is a fun variety of personalities that have some great build-up across the board. I will say there were moments where it felt like certain character developments or growth would repeat themselves, like almost a lesson would come in one year and out the other, only to repeat itself again later on. Outside of those moments, I truly appreciated the time spent on building these characters and equally giving us time to learn about them and feel invested in them. I didn't feel like one particular character outweighed the others, as they all had a say in this adventure. If anything, it was the number of side quests that pertained to each character, further fleshing out their backstories with full voice acting on content that isn't even considered main quests. This ultimately spoke for the level of attention and care put into this entry's narrative scope. Xenoblade Chronicles 3's world is huge, lush, and just fun to explore. As you navigate the wide open spaces, you'll come across all sorts of monsters and find no shortage of collectibles and additional side quests to embark on. New party members will slowly join your party, and organizing how you go about fighting with them will be a lot of the meat in this campaign. Characters have their own set of skills, equipment, and art abilities, but a new mechanic lets you trade character classes between members of your party. It's an interesting mechanic that pushed me to master a variety of skills for a handful of my party members. The end result would be these fascinating warriors who can swing around a giant sword while also buffing the rest of my party. Experimenting with different combinations was half of the fun, as it felt like developing a competitive Pokemon team. That fuels the streamlined battle system. The usual auto attack mechanic is back, along with powerful art and attack combos. However, now you can quickly switch between characters for manual control of the whole cast, while also combining attacks for these all-out finishers. Along with chaining attacks and combos, it was a fun battle system to manage across 6 characters and the occasional guest NPC. With that said, the boss fights don't feel as well thought out, or at least special in any regard. Most of the time I fought the same enemies over and over again, and their boss or leader oftentimes were just another version of them. This only became further diluted when the game would make me fight the same boss twice, back to back, with a cutscene break in between. Aside from the main quest, one major improvement with the structure of the campaign are the side quests. Previous games were riddled with side quests that usually boiled down to fetch quests, where you would get more resources but not so much story. Luckily, there's been a change with the sequel now focusing on building lore and backstory for the 6 characters, making these quests feel more like supplemental content rather than just added padding. The unfortunate drawback with all these additions and new mechanics are the tutorials, which are pretty intrusive and all over the place. Now don't get me wrong, they're needed with the amount of mechanics Xenoblade is throwing at you all the time, but you should know that about 10 hours into this, you'll still be getting tutorials. It's at least been streamlined from the even worse setup in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. When it comes to visuals, the Xenoblade series has always had a reputation for having this large, beautiful world, but also arguably some of the lowest resolution gameplay to come out any first-party Nintendo game. This continues on with Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but that's not to say that improvements haven't been made. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, at least from a Nintendo Switch standard, is an impressive technical showcase. The environments across the new planets show beautiful landscapes that look lush, dynamic, and saturated, especially on the OLED Switch. The game still suffers from the lower resolution the series has been known for hitting a dynamic 540p 30fps in dock mode and a dynamic 360p 30fps in handheld mode. However, those low resolutions are supplemented with very heavy sharpening filters and an upscaler that honestly makes the end picture look significantly better than those 2 resolutions previously mentioned. It's not suddenly going to look like a PS4 or an Xbox One game, but Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is no doubt the best looking game in the series thus far on Switch. You will catch the occasional artifacting when faster scenes take place, but the sacrifice is more than worth it in my opinion. Outside of gameplay are some marvelously animated cutscenes that really push the more anime art style than any other game in the series thus far. Character models are bright and colorful, while using a 2D facial asset library for things like eyes, noses, and hair. It's an interesting choice that in place looks shockingly nice. It's not in the realm of the 2D to 3D anime art style for Dragon Ball FighterZ, but it still looks great. As I mentioned before, the frame rate targets 30 FPS, and while it hits the target a lot of the time, it ultimately varies on the complexity of the scene. I've seen dips mostly when multiple characters are launching a skill in a wide environment with a large enemy. Again, for general standards, it's apparent that Monolith is pushing the Switch to its limits, but on a Xenoblade series standard, I'm impressed by just how much improvement there's been between Xenoblade 2 and 3 visually. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 continues its impressive presentation in its audio design, where Monolith once again is firing on all cylinders. The music here is epic and just pulls you in, tugging you at your heartstrings to fit the tone of every scene. During gameplay, I was enamored by the various battle themes that are absolutely fantastic, albeit occasionally somewhat ruined by the weird repeating lines of characters.
Lance wants something a bit meatier. Lance wants something a bit meatier.
It's not all that bad. I genuinely do like the voice acting here, and having the option to choose between English and Japanese is welcome. A lot of the game is fully voiced across the main quest, side quests, and many cutscenes. I still prefer the Japanese voice acting, but the English lines were solid. Again, my only real gripe with the audio were the repeating lines and characters just saying the same thing over and over again during specific gameplay moments like a battle ending. You would think that a game with so much voice acting, they would add some bit of variety between these gameplay type voice clips. After playing well above 100 hours and finally rolling credits on it, I can safely say Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is my favorite entry in the series thus far. Across the board, Monolith has improved on its writing, presentation style, and refined gameplay to feel more streamlined than ever. I still have my gripes with the low resolution gameplay, the abundance of tutorials that at least aren't as bad as prior entries, and the occasional odd voice line, but overall Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a great improvement from its predecessor. Honestly, that's shocking because going back to that, I didn't think the visuals would be able to get any better, which should explain why Monolith is now helping with the upcoming Breath of the Wild sequel. Nevertheless, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a fantastic follow-up for this beloved JRPG series, and a great starting point for anyone looking to get started.